Hi everyone. We're starting with a blurb today. Given the epicness of the sort of pixely situation that we've got, and being insurance people, we don't get to get creative very often, so please humor us. Pixel glitches meet legal pitches in today's presentation. It's all fun and games until someone gets sued by Iron Maiden. Sorry, I should stand close to the mic. Pixels collide as we journey through high scores and court floors where video game realms and real-world law find common ground for an epic smackdown. Tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi nui, he mihi mahana. Thank you so much for joining us. I know how epic the program is, and we're really psyched to have you guys with us today for our presentation. The real thrust of what we're going to go through today is kind of looking at the sort of risk element of running a video game studio and some of the real world examples that we've been seeing play out in the courts. Obviously, a lot of it is US based, but we've tried to put a real focus on some of the more mid-tier studios as well, which experience sort of similar risks, sometimes at higher stakes, because, you know, it's ride or die quite a lot in the early stages. So today we're going to introduce ourselves, go through some of these risks and lawsuits, and we'll open up for some Q&A at the end. So without further ado, who are we? My name is Edmund Barker, and this is the legendary Aya Zabad. We are insurance brokers with a company called Partridge Advisory. It's named after my mum, and it was founded by my brother. We're really proud to specialize in industries that we're super passionate about. We find that when we do that, we really knock it out of the park for the companies that we work with. And we're both avid gamers, and this is a space that we're just super passionate about. You know, like a lot of core memories, certainly growing up for us, were just nerding out, playing video games, and getting it on with our friends. Like this is kind of what we love and what we do. The company was founded by my brother. He has an illustrious career as an insurance underwriter, and we've been really fortunate to kind of come along with him on this journey and leverage his global networks to really knock it out of the park for some gaming studios locally. So without further ado, I'd really love to hand it over to Aya to introduce probably the spiciest risk element in video game studios, which is intellectual property.
Hi guys, I guess I'll just kick things off then, and I really hope the mic picks me up. Okay, it is. So, IP. Guys, this was probably my favorite topic in this whole presentation. And so intellectual property is easily the most heavily litigated area in the gaming industry. It's because games are so complex. It's a combination of art, pictures, music, songs, designs, and programs, which makes game developers a very easy target for IP litigation. I'm going to get into some examples, but I just want you to know that some of them are pretty spicy. As I was doing my research, I was blown away and a little bit scared. So we'll start with, again, my favorite example. In 2016, a tattoo artist sued Take-Two Interactive, the guys behind the NBA 2K series. They sued them because they used his tattoo design for LeBron James in the NBA 2K games. And that didn't go anywhere. But a few years later, a tattoo artist for the wrestler Randy Orton also sued Take-Two and actually won a few $1,000s out of it. So I just want to say the figures start small, but they're going to rack up very soon. Relevant to the title of our presentation, in 2019, Iron Maiden sued a little studio called 3D Realms over the title and logo of their game, Iron Maiden. So it's not very nice. In a similar case in 2022, Monster Energy sued a studio called Glowstick Entertainment for using the word monster in the title of their game, Dark Deception, Monsters and Mortals. I know, it makes you roll your eyes. And the thing about Monster Energy is I did a lot of research into them. They'd sued over 130 companies, and not all of them were games. They sued Pocket Monsters, you know, sort of Pokemon-like game. But they also sued Potty Monsters, an adult diaper company in the US. They really have no chill. And I guess this is a classic example of what we call a trademark troll. They literally think they own the word monster. Anyways, on to another example, which is a little bit different, a bit of a story, so bear with me. It started in 2019, and it's still ongoing. Nexon, MapleStory, for those of you who haven't played it. Nexon sued Iron Maiden for stealing trade secrets and copyright infringement. It's a mouthful, but here's the story. So a dev was working at Nexon on an unreleased game, quit his job, moved to Iron Maiden, and basically recreated the game. Things did not go well for Iron Maiden or for the game. It got booted off Steam. The early access was severely delayed, and actually just a few weeks ago, because this is still an ongoing battle, the dev, Nexon filed an arrest warrant against the dev. Ooh, yeah, it's not so good. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is data and security, and it's a pretty big topic to cover. So the thing is, game developers hold a lot of information, especially if you're online and you're multiplayer. Game devs and studios hold a lot of personal information, but also a lot of payment details. And that makes them a really easy target, and increasingly so recently, for cyber attacks and data breaches. And that can basically compromise their game servers, but most significantly, their user privacy. And that's a pretty big deal because game developers are very responsible to create a safe platform and protect their users, right? So I'll get into some examples. I will start by saying, again, as we've mentioned in the beginning, there are a lot of really big examples like Nintendo, EA, really big cyber breaches that have happened. And our focus here is to show you examples of smaller, indie, medium-sized companies that have suffered, events like this. So without further ado, in 2018, a studio called Blank Media Games, they are behind the browser game Town of Salem, if you guys know that game. And they were the victim of a data breach, and it compromised the IP addresses and email addresses for 7.6 million users. That's a pretty big number. Yeah. The plot thickens in 2022. Axie Infinity. It's a play-to-earn game, one of those newer crypto monster collection games. I don't recommend unless you want to lose a lot of money. But it's really fun. Anyways, so they were... We love to hurt ourselves. So they were the victim of a pretty bad, makes me cringe, but a pretty bad phishing scheme. They lost 620 million of their native crypto in-game asset through fake LinkedIn job offers. I'm going to tell you the story because it's interesting. So a North Korean hacker group listed a fake job on LinkedIn. Literally, this is real life. They listed a fake job on LinkedIn, and one of the devs got interested. He went through the application process. They sent him a PDF of the job details. And yeah, basically that was their gateway into the back-end token system. So yeah, wasn't great for them. Moving on, I'm going to hand it over.
What was the number though?
620 million. Yeah, it's pretty bad. On to talent. Back to Ed.
Awesome. Thank you, Aya. Epic. So we kind of... talent's a really interesting one. If we look at the New Zealand market, it's something that we can hold our heads really high about. We've got an incredible culture within this community. It's very tight knit, and I think is probably in terms of gaming events, this is probably right up there internationally with the amount of diversity and inclusion that you'll see at these sorts of events. And I think that's something that we should be really proud of. But we also know that that kind of is riding high on potentially an industry that hasn't always behaved super great. So we know that video game studios operate in a really high stress environment quite often, and it's delivering on budget and it's delivering on time, and those two things are often in conflict, and you don't always necessarily have that historically that sort of requisite talent at the top to really manage that in an appropriate way. And so we've seen some pretty spicy lawsuits in this space, but I think it's really worth noting as well that for smaller studios, this stuff is existential. If you get a bad rep as a bad employer, then it's very, very hard to find and retain talent. And the talent that you are likely to find and retain might not foster, a good environment to continue that journey as you grow. In terms of very, very large examples, Activision Blizzard settled a $35 million lawsuit. It was a class action lawsuit from female employees for sexual harassment and a whole bunch of gaslighting. And we've seen similar activity out of Riot a couple of years ago for $100 million settlement for sort of emotional abuse and those sorts of things. But when we sort of start to scratch the surface on smaller studios and indie games, it's a little bit more difficult. And the reason why is because as opposed to very large, very public class action lawsuits, what you're seeing is individual employment matters that get settled behind closed doors. With that said, we have seen a couple of examples. 2022, Fundamenta, they had They got a really bad reputation for, again, employee gaslighting, so emotional abuse, and a really negative working environment. And they're actually facing closure as a result of that. Bad reputation, unable to hold and retain staff for a small studio is real trouble. A similar example was Monument in Australia. Again, facing those similar sorts of accusations. We don't know what the dollar figures were in those in any settlements. A lot of these matters are ongoing, but what we do know is that if we know about it and you know about it, then these are probably companies that you don't necessarily want to go out and work for. I think one of the opportunities that we have in New Zealand is actually leveraging this culture and again, setting that example on the world stage, but also being able to attract and retain international talent as well. People that are kind of fed up with, some of those old school habits that have existed internationally. Online gaming is wild from a risk perspective. So we've seen. We've seen all sorts, and this was probably alongside IP. This was the other category that we really had to condense down: cheating, fraud, toxic online harassment, a lot of issues relating to kids. It's a really interesting space, and one that's very hard for studios to keep on top of as well, particularly from a moderation perspective. The kind of trifecta is that. You can build online games where a negative user experience leads to a massive loss of your player base, and that can also lead to class action lawsuits or legal action against the studios. In 2022, we saw record action relating to loot box lawsuits and illegal gambling as well, fraud, and misrepresentations. These are all really commonplace in the online gaming environment. One of the really prominent examples is skin gambling and CS:GO Go and Dota 2, using illegal third-party auction sites to sort of gamble these away. It's become a really massive problem, and it's kind of off to the side of the actual game itself. We've seen it's a really old trend that's reared up again, which is the sort of gaming disorder. So those of you who are around early 2000s, like WoW, StarCraft, you saw some really big issues with that. The reality is it's not really something that's ever been too sticky in the courts, but it always costs a ton of money to defend. And the most recent example that I'm sure most people will know about is Fortnite. So class action lawsuits from concerned parents of their kids spending far too much time. This isn't something that, again, is going to necessarily be successful in like those massive figure settlements. It's more about the cost to defend those sorts of lawsuits can be really attritional to gaming studios. And it's also, as long as there is video games where there is a perception that they kind of incentivize time in game, it's just going to continue on. The one to finish on with online gaming is Roblox. I've got 2 kids, they're 7 and 5, and it terrifies me. I love playing games with my kids as a family. Roblox, I don't know how to approach it because it's genuinely terrifying. Again, we could have done an entire session on just Roblox, from copyright takedowns, lawsuits to straight out disturbing instances. One of the ones that it doesn't seem too well known on the international stage when you're looking at Roblox, but following the Christchurch terrorist attack, people were creating instances, re-simulating that event, and which is horrible. The reality is that the moderators couldn't keep up with the takedown, so it kept on reiterating and popping back up. And I think, again, as a parent, that's an incredibly disturbing event to come up. There wasn't any legal action that resulted out of it, but like reputationally and again, attritional user base, it's something that I, as a parent, certainly wouldn't want my kids near. And yeah, it's horrible. There's also, I guess, more slightly like Chicago gangster-esque, this massive like underground gambling sort of culture within Roblox where kids are being swindled out of thousands of dollars, and it's just like a really systemic problem. And we're currently also seeing some election interference as well. A whole bunch of users going on to try and basically pro-Trump MAGA kind of basically setting up users with like blue head, red body, white, like a sort of red, blue and white character, and going around like with MAGA slogans and stuff like that, causing general terror. And there's an ongoing Kim Kardashian lawsuit at the moment where she's threatening against some of her property being used in the Roblox environment. So those massive sandbox environments are really problematic in terms of being able to stay across the moderation, but also being able to fend off, because Roblox is if they haven't gone already, they planning to go public. And list, and like that kind of action against that kind of company when they're public, when they're listed on a stock exchange, it's real trouble for them. The directors of the company are going to be fending off some significant action. Cool. Off to Aya.
Tag team.
We.
Onto a slightly boring but still very serious topic, which is compliance or regulatory compliance. So, I mean, game developers and gaming studios have their own regulatory waters to traverse, and they have very specific requirements that they need to meet when they launch a game. So things like age ratings and content restriction are really specific, but more generally, you have consumer protection laws and privacy regulation. It goes without saying, non-compliance can lead to fines and penalties, and some are really big, or even legal action and reputational damage. So on to some examples. So in 2022, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission fined Epic Games $520 million for illegally collecting children's personal information and for tricking kids into making unwanted purchases in Fortnite. That is no small figure, and that's a fine. That wasn't a class action lawsuit. That was a straight-up government fine, and they had to pay it. Just recently, in 2023, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission fined Activision Blizzard $35 million for breaching whistleblower protection laws and investor disclosure laws. This is actually related to the earlier example that Ed gave on talent and recruitment, and it had to do with the employee harassment and discrimination claims. It basically escalated into a government fine of $35 million. And back in 2021, Valve and 5 other publishers were fined $9.4 million for violating antitrust laws because they geo-blocked Steam games in Europe. So we've talked through a lot of examples and a lot of risks today, and I hope it's comforting to say, and of course we were going to get to this at some point, that most of these risks are largely insurable. And of course, we'd be more than happy to assist and advise. But let's go over what this looks like. What does the insurance look like for this in real terms? IP. So we know how crazy things can get when IP is involved. And from the examples we've shown, you'll see that you're not trying to breach someone else's IP. You don't even mean to. You might not have even done it. It doesn't stop someone from coming after you. And IP defense insurance can really soften the blow of legal action taken against you. And what it does, very simply, is it'll cover defense and settlement costs. Okay, so the cost of going through the court and defending these claims, even if they're not true, it still costs you money. And in the instance where perhaps someone's in breach of your IP and your IP rights, you can get pursuit cover and go after them and take legal action. On to data and security and cyber in general. So if you suffer a cyber attack or a privacy breach, cyber insurance will allow you and give you access to expert cyber forensic team, legal team, and a PR team that'll advise you and coach you through the process. They'll help you bring your servers and your game back online, and they'll deal with the legal ramifications, whatever they are. On to the talent and recruitment. So we have employment practices liability, or EPL for short. And what it'll do is it will protect you from claims brought on by employees, whether those claims are for wrongful dismissal, discrimination, or harassment. It's important to mention that in real terms and in reality, the dollar figures will be much smaller. This insurance won't respond to these $100, $200 million claims. We're talking about normal $10 to $20 to $20 to $30,000 claims. And this one's a bit more general, but it's still very relevant, is technology liability or tech insurance. Look, mistakes are unavoidable. Like I said, of course, no one wants to do these things on purpose. They happen anyways. And I guess what insurance can do is it can reduce the severity of the consequences. No one can stop it from happening, but they can at least look after you and help you through the process and cover the costs. So technology liability will help in instances of professional mistakes, oversight, negligence, contractual liability. It's a mouthful. So in real terms, what does this mean? If the release or launch of your game doesn't go as planned, so you can't launch it or release it on time, or perhaps you have, but not up to standard, and your gamers come after you, your shareholders come after you, someone else comes after you. As we like to say, everyone gets their day in court. Whether or not you're wrong, you will get dragged through the court. So this is something that will respond in situations like this. And lastly, we have directors and officers insurance. So it protects your directors, your executive management team, and your senior management for basically mismanaging the business. Again, hopefully unintentionally and accidentally. Won't cover fraud and criminal convictions. So in real terms, this looks like a shareholder claim for loss of profits against the board of directors for signing off on the release of a game that was not ready. A really good example in the media that just recently settled for $1.9 million is the CD Projekt Red case that insurers brought on for Cyberpunk. Yeah. Look, thanks for listening to us today, and thanks for coming here. That is the end of our presentation, and we'd be happy to take any questions. If there are any at all. Emotionally draining. It's depressing.
Thank you both for that. That was quite interesting. Do you have any kind of guideline around for a very early stage studio when it's just you or a couple of others? kind of when to talk to someone like yourselves, or is it before launch? Is it 6 months before launch? Is it the day you have the idea in the shower? Probably not that last one.
I mean, Ed will take this, but as early as possible, please. Ed.
I think one of the things that's kind of useful to know about a company like us, I guess, is that we don't really care about, we're here to support 100%. So the earlier the better, because we will give you free advice, because that helps us do our job down the track. If we think that you need to go and see a lawyer to improve your terms, we'll give you that advice. In terms of actually spending money on insurance day before launch, and then if it falls flat on its face, cancel it 2 days later and get your money back, basically. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's probably better to have, like on the cancellations and that sort of thing, like genuinely, that's something that is 100% doable. Like, I think it's, if I was to go down the road of what I would get, it would probably be cyber insurance would be the baseline, and if it's an IP heavy title, then IP cover as well. But we know what it's like for early stage companies. That's who we like to work with. So it's go basically as bare as you can until you start to see some commercial success, and we can put appropriate cover in place. But we like to advise really early, because we find that's when we're actually most helpful. Yeah.
Hey, great talk. I guess my question is, how much money do we need to have before we come and speak to you? Obviously, insurance is heavily dependent on what it is you're actually protecting and what the studio requires. But if you were to maybe provide a hypothetical 1-2-man band with their first indie title, single player, what type of money are we talking about for just some basic protection?
That is an awesome question, and one for the ages, and like one that no insurance broker will ever answer directly. 5 to 10K is what I'd put aside. Yeah. And again, it really depends on the coverage. Again, I shouldn't say this, but for me, if I was releasing a game, I would go as bare bones as possible on this to cover my critical risks, as opposed to going down that full noise route. Because the reality is, it's money spent on yourselves, your contractors, your infrastructure, and getting the thing up and really getting it successful. Insurance is completely pointless if you're not spending money on those things as well. So, yeah, 5 to 10K ish.
And also, sorry, just to add on to that, I mean, look, of course, there's a full package of insurance, but the truth is, it'll come in iterations. So you'll start with one thing because that's what you need. You've just raised capital, you've got investment, so your investors need you to have some directors and officers liability. So you need to have it, you'll have it. Maybe a year down the line, 2 years down the line, you launch a game. Then we look at it again. It's very rarely a full package at once, because it is pretty expensive. And we will usually just do what's bare minimum needed. Yeah.
I think one of the things that we've really experienced we've had like the real privilege. We've insured a couple of rocket launches this year. We've done some like really spicy, crazy stuff. And what we've found through all of it is that no one, like genuinely nobody cares about insurance until they really care about insurance. Like until it's the thing that keeps them up at 3 a.m. And like that's kind of how it goes. So we fully get that. So we're happy to iterate and bring it on as the risk comes online. Like that's our preference. We think at all times the money is best in the studio's back pocket, unless it has to go somewhere else, like insurance.
Well, thank you.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.